So, the 7 conflicts. This is very important to figuring out what the hell is my story about, right? So we always know that we have to have a conflict in the story and everything, but not many people in their writing courses are introduced to the 7 conflicts. I call it the 7 conflicts of Aristotle myself, but it's just 7 conflicts. Which would be man versus self. What do you think that is?
Oh.
Man versus self.
Like dealing with like PTSD or something.
How would you tell that in a story? You're right, but how would you know?
You show him coming back from war, and then you go look at how upset he is about having to live a normal life.
Like John Voight coming home,
Yeah.
right? So they usually say it's an eternal conflict, where man is suffering or struggling with himself and issues that he has with himself, right, and everything, and it's how he's going to survive. So they usually say that it's represented, like, say, with mental illness, but like basically a very good example of this is Fight Club. Anybody have seen it?
Yeah.
Now, what's excellent about this movie is that it's pretty much, Edward Norton, right, suffering through his schizophrenia, and David Fincher as the director chose a very interesting way of dealing with that by creating his avatar self, right, his highest representation of himself. I'm so crap, right, that he creates Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt. Look how sexy I am. Look how everybody loves me. You know what I mean? Now, what was really excellent about that film and how he did it was in a way where, like, he shot it where it's like he actually revealed that, okay, I'm tricking you. So for half of the story, we're looking at 2 guys, and then I'm flipping it and letting you know that we're only looking at 1 guy. And actually, I'm going to show you how we did it. Now, Edward Norton, tour de force acting on this part, right? But we start to see things that are impossible. What is he, a superhero? Like when we're looking at him on the television screens, like hitting himself and, throwing himself through glass and everything, it's kind of like, whoa, what's happening? But that was the director's choice. But this is a screenwriting thing. As a story, it could have been really complex to write because you're trying to deal with mental illness or trying to deal with how a person is like battling himself. And the director, which will always happen because this is about screenwriting, will always interpret your story, right? So you want to do something about PTSD, right? Your director will be like this. How would I do this? Right? What if, like, there's 2 people? You know what I mean? And then you go, that's not my story, but it's much better. Sorry, but that's just what happens. So maybe man versus self is not the kind of story you should be writing when you're looking at what kind of story should I be doing. So that's one type of conflict. The other type of conflict, which is the main conflict that we all are well aware of, is man versus man. Now that's where you could say, what were you saying before? Yes, about the antagonist, right?
Yeah.
This is man versus man. Now, we're not leaving women out. Yeah? Women is like, whoa, man. Man versus whoa, man. But it's still man versus man. Even if it was man versus woman, like in War of the Roses, it still will be the same conflict of man versus man. It's about protagonist versus antagonist, good guy versus bad guy. Yeah? It's about the good guy has a need or a want, and the bad guy wants to stop that need or want. And this is where your teachers will often tell you when you did writing classes, they will always often discuss that concept within that flourish, man versus man. Yeah? Now, what I was going to do here is I was going to show you an example, but I noticed how my good friend over there keeps looking at her watch, and I got things to get through. But, talking to her.
Oh.
You're my good friend too. Rocky is a really fantastic example of this, I feel, because, I would ask the question, I wrote down, what does Rocky want? I'm talking about the first one, not the 6th or the 7th or the 20th.
Does he want to be accepted?
I thought he wanted to win.
Yeah, but to win, you're going to get accepted, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, you're right.
I know I'm right.
You are right. He won. I thought I was going to trick you, but that's good. Most people say, yeah, man, he wants to win the fight. He doesn't care about that fight. Rocky doesn't care about that fight. He's told that he won, and he's like, oh, where's Adrian? Oh, where's Adrian? Right? Doesn't care about that fight. He wants respect. He was a polluter. He was a bum. He was a street brawler. He was a hustler. Right? All he wants is respect, and he played that role well. And what I thought was really great in the scene that I had pulled out was the scene where Apollo, who was downgraded him throughout the whole film, at that one moment, when Rocky's like, we're going down, right? He's like, come on, man, come on. That's my bad Rocky impression. But Apollo goes like this. That one moment was genius. Because that was respect. This guy ain't falling. He's not going down. And that is why they became lifelong friends. To live on in the sequels. Right? To die and then have a son in the new movies. But that is why. And if you can't look at film the way I'm looking at film, and I'm trying to help you look at film, you gotta look at it from that perspective as a writer. It's like, where is the magic in these scenes, in these characters? Where is the magic that the director is gonna pull out here, right? And it's those small little moments that matter, because that's the one that hits us emotionally. Yeah? It's that one moment. So man versus man, yes, it's very common conflict, but make it your own is what I'm trying to say, and find moments like that one where those two, because there's always the polar opposites, like Black Panther, ooh, Wakanda forever. So always the polar opposites of like Killmonger and Black Panther, and how Black Panther still respected Killmonger's opinion and status of what it is that he was fighting for. He just didn't like the way he was doing it. Right? That makes him the bad guy. All right, third one, man versus society. Now, some people will call this world. And that's really kind of like the little guy going up against the big system. Yeah? You know, and the example that I had pulled out was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, because I'm old. So who remembers that movie? What? What? What?
No. And I'm older than you.
Jimmy Stewart. Yes. Jimmy
I
Stewart.
remember it, but you'd have to. I
I
know.
wasn't,
I'm sure I've seen it.
I wasn't sure.
I'm sure you saw it too.
That was the best I could do.
Jimmy Stewart, you know, was a simple little alderman in his town, and you know, he wanted to stop the government from taking over and everything. And the way you can do it, like, is when you go to Congress, you can do what they call filibustering. And it was pure dialogue, this film, right? Pure dialogue as writers was like, how am I going to express the passion, the raw passion of this one lone man against a whole amphitheater of government oppression?
Was given this very complicated explanation as to what this.
Yeah, well, what that just is
And
called.
Justin Hoffman turns to him and says, "Explain that to me as though it was the nature
Aww.
of it." And I thought one of the greatest lines.
Yeah. That's a trope. I was going to get to that particular trope, but it's no, you're right. It's like science treats human beings, us, as dummies, right? You know, because they have to feel they have to dumb down science, especially when they're making it up anyway. Science is called science fiction for a reason, not science fact, right? So the whole point is that they're creating all this rhetoric, and I was going to go through that into the next one. But what I was just trying to say about man versus nature is that it is like earthquake, volcano, any kind of ocean themed story. You know, is like when man has to confront the elements. You know, it's kind of like so. My favorite is the Truman Show, of course. You know, like when he's trying to get away, when he's trying to break out of his reality, and then, you know, you got, you know, Ed Harris going, cue the clouds! That is a fantastic scene because, you know, where, you know, he tosses Truman when he hits the wall, right? He goes, who are you? I'm a TV show. you have to have that break in there when he does that. It's like that. But mainly, this is where the monologues come in. You know, it's like, as writing, it's like the monologues have to be filled with tension, despair, desperation, and need. You know, this is where your actors say, I want this writer to write for me. Because that is where the juice is. The juice is always going to be in that monologue. But in the man versus nature stories, those monologues is usually there because it's a personification. It's not, you know, it's weather. It's, you know, it's earthquake, you know what I mean? So there's always going to be a scene where somebody gets to rage. Then my favorite, man versus machine. Now, of course, you know which one this is going to be.
Terminator.
Of course. Of course.
Showing the age now.
And this is where that psychobabble or sci-fi babble rhetoric crap comes from. You know, it's kind of like, you know, I read comics, you know, and in the 60s when they were writing science and all that. Yeah, I know you do too. In the 60s when they were writing all this stuff, they were making it all up. Yeah, so the doohickey on the waku, you know, or the timey-wimey stuff that you hear in Doctor Who, you know, it never made sense. But then eventually they forced writers to go to some kind of school. You know? Dude, it's gotta sound real, man. Go and just look at some encyclopedias and stuff. But, you know, also what I thought was really interesting about this man versus machine, about how man has to, you know, because when we have like the atomic age and the nuclear age, you know, the 50s and 60s, there was always this overwhelming dread and fear that was in storytelling, you know, from Asimov and all that kind of stuff. It's like the robotics, laws of robotics, the future's taking over, who are we and how are we gonna survive, Logan's Run, you know, and all of this other kind of stuff. But one story I thought was really interesting was, I don't know if anybody heard of it, but the story of John Henry, black guy. No, story of John Henry, who was like, you know, he was like, you know, building railroads, and, you know, they were bringing in a machine that could do it. So they wanted to fire everyone. And then he's like, no, I'm better than any machine. And, you know, and then it's like he had to, like, you know, force a fight to be able to pile drive, you know, the planks in. It's a fantastic old story, you know, not just in my neighborhood, but it's just a great John Henry, story of John Henry. But he died. It's a tragic story, you know, because even though he showed his indomitable human spirit, he still, you know, could not
understand the machine. That Terminator is out there.
Will always win. And that's where Terminator comes in. You know? It's like the unstoppable machine. That monologue that Reese gives to Sarah Connor where he said, he won't stop.
And it absolutely
you
will
can't
not
negotiate
stop.
with it.
Ever.
You can't fight it.
That's what's scary.
I know, it is.
Scary.
But it was also magical because that film was full of all of that psychobabble rhetoric. But what I was trying to point out when you know, seeing from it is the fact that you have to, as a writer, you have to be able to, you know, like, you know, shortcut these type of science facts and possibilities. You know, it's like providing that writing with pauses. You know, I think a lot of writers tend to
the
just
time displacement equipment.
verbiage. You know what I mean?
The Terminator had already gone through.
You know?
Connor
But if
sent
you
me
notice
to
that when
intercept
you write
Naval
just only like 3
Place.
lines of dialogue here
How
and
are you
there,
supposed to get
and
back?
pepper it actually becomes much more interesting and tolerable to listen to.
Nobody goes home.
Especially when you're dealing with this whole science rhetoric stuff. And
Nobody
then you're
else
given
comes
space
through.
for reactions.
Ray guns? Ray guns.
Show me a piece of future technology. You go naked. Something about the field generated by a living organism. Nothing dead will go. I didn't build a fucking thing.
Okay. But this cyborg, if it's metal...
Surrounded by living tissue.
Oh, right.
This is great stuff. I could make a career out of this guy. You see how clever this part is? How it doesn't require a shred of proof? And most paranoid delusions are intricate, but this is brilliant.
You know, acting to take place. But mainly, what you said before, it's like the trope is to treat everyone as an idiot. You know, science for dummies. You know, that is the trope. and stuff, you know. I mean, like, it's kind of like looking at a movie that's shot in your neighborhood, and he goes, that's not my street. That street does not turn into that street when they're doing car chases. I love it when they try to shoot in Liverpool. That street doesn't turn it. That's a dead end. What are you talking about? You know, but yeah. They try to make sense about it. You know, yeah, that's it. So then, when they flip the page, Man versus Fate. I love this one. What they do is they kind of like combine Man versus Fate and Man versus Supernatural, right? But they are actually two different things. Okay, so Man versus Fate is this in any story in which the protagonist is struggling against a god or gods, right? So like this is where you get your, you know, like your Odyssey, your Iliad. For me, it was Jason and the Argonauts. Can you tell I'm a big film fan? You know, you actually should be writing these films down because I bet you go home and you watch it, you'll be like, thank you for the film list. Jason and the Argonauts is a classic, but what's great about that is just that, I mean, it was Ray Harryhausen and the way it was shot was so beautiful, but it's a chance for you to really explore new worlds, new dimensions in your writing. So, I mean, like, it's a way of, because religion, from so many different societies, you know, have their own version of Mercury, Hercules, Zeus. So they call them by various different names. They call all the different gods and aspects various different things. So then when you're telling a story, you're throwing that element in there. It's great. But what you always have to have is that protagonist who is the audience. So when Jason is found by Hermes, right, and Jason's like, yeah, man, these guys, you know, they really let us down. You know, and it's like, and he looks at this fallen statue, like Ozymandias.
The statue was the god.
And Hermes goes, yes. I'm pretty sure that's where Mel Brooks got that from. Into the world, right?
Bringer of dream.
And then he's like, no, this is Hermes. Oh.
Jason.
And then Hermes takes him to Mount Olympus. And, you know, they're all looking down at him, and Jason's here, you know, all shot on a green screen of some kind. But the main thing is, it's fantastic. You gotta watch this movie. But, yeah, all those kind of sword and sandals, you know, fantasy films. You could throw in knights, you know, the Round Table, King Arthur and all that will all be a matter of, like, Man versus Fate. Because it's not science. Yeah? It's fate. It's godlike. So then comes horror films, which is my favorite, Man versus the Supernatural. Yeah? And my choice for you, the Silver Bullet. Now you go, what? Why you keep going up? I remember that. What's the antagonist in that movie?
I don't remember it all.
It's a werewolf, man. I thought you said you did remember.
I remember the name.
Corey Haim and everything.
I got my silver bullet. I thought you were going to say Carrie.
It is. Silver Bullet, central character. Yeah, Corey Haim in a wheelchair. So what's interesting, the reason why I also picked this is what's interesting is Stephen King, first of all, fantastic book. But the protagonist is a little boy in a wheelchair. How the hell is he gonna survive against a werewolf that's killing everybody in his town? It's a major body count. You know, I mean, you know, how can he actually survive against that? And then he has a sister who is helping him, and he has a drunk uncle, get played by Gary Busey, who has to be what I think is always terrible in these horror tropes. You don't wonder why you say to yourself, it made me think myself, it's like, how come these girls are always in trouble, right? Like in these campfires, like Jason and, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street. Why are they always in trouble? And every time you see a guy, the guy is stupid, right? What is it? Friday the 13th 2, when the guy comes in, like the girl is fighting against Jason, you know, Jason was like the elephant man, and he comes in and he fights with Jason, because that's what you always gotta do. It's a god, he has to be heroic, he has to fight supernatural. And that's what happens with Gary Busey and Silver Bullet. But the helplessness of a kid in a wheelchair and his sister, you go, oh, how are they gonna survive? So what they have to do as writers, you have to give them some high achievement. So it's not going to be physical prowess, but it's going to be mental prowess. They're going to be smart, they're going to be clever, right? And everything. And that's how they do battle with their brains, you know, and everything like that. And then that kid had rubber arms to fit through this really small little grate to try and get the silver bullet. That was stupid. But hey, you know, it works. So then the final conflict. Oh, but Man vs. Supernatural was pretty much all horror films, by the way. Now, the final conflict is my addition to the conflicts. So it's really 8, but then there's 7 because these two were together. Time. I don't know why, when I looked at the official conflict list, time wasn't on it. Isn't time always a conflict? Time is running out. I gotta defuse this bomb in 5 seconds, but I need 10 minutes to do it. Right? You've seen it, every movie, right?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, so that running clock is a conflict. You know, whether, you know, I got time, or I ain't got no time, or I'm running out of time, and anything. So,
Like a train on the tracks with a bomb on board or something.
are you talking about the source code? Are you talking about the source code?
Is that, yeah, all those sort of things. Is that them?
Yeah. Because the worst thing about time and the most interesting thing about time is the fact that there's no way you can extend 5 seconds. But they do it all the time through the cutting, right? You know, it's like I gotta defuse this bomb and they put on a clock, you know, 5 seconds. The only thing they can't do is go back and go 8. They gotta make sure that they put a high enough number that, 3 seconds is really long to have a conversation with this person, right? You know, in 3 seconds. And everything, so it's funny, but it's good. It's a trope, and it's what we do. But using that conflict is a good conflict as far as running out of time. Yeah.
What about life? Time as in
Life?
As in life.
Life, man versus life.
No, I mean life.
Oh, lifetime. You mean?
Lifetime.
Oh, lifetime.
Lifetime.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll go for that. Lifetime. I mean, lifetime could work. You know. And everything, but yeah, it's mainly about you guys were worrying me putting your coats on and stuff.
No,
I had to look at my clock.
No,
So, does anybody understand any questions on that? You know, because one is that I film my lectures and stuff, and you can always follow me on Square One Visual Grammar.
And what?
Square One Visual Grammar. But then also
I
too
said
is
glamour then.
Right.
Oh, we get glamour as well.
Glamour, yeah, all right. But I really think that when it comes to building characters, as I said that this was going to be about, is just that building character through story is also important, because once I know that my hero is a cop or a drunken father or, you know, or a political assassin, I have to still figure out not just who the antagonist is, but what the conflict is of that story. Because what is that person dealing with? Are they dealing with society? Are they dealing with man? Are they dealing with self? Right? Like the Manchurian Candidate would probably be man versus self in that aspect. Right? Now, a lot of times they try to confuse you with conflicts and they say, well, you know, you can always have man versus self as a part of man versus machine, or also as a part of a man versus supernatural, and don't overcomplicate yourself. The main thing about it is that you know that whatever kind of story works for you, your storytelling skill set, which one is it that you would choose as the conflict of that story? Then once you know that that's the conflict of that story, you go back. Who's the main character and the central character of that story? Who's on the adventure and who's on the journey? And then once I know who the sidekick that is on the journey, right? Then it's about telling that person's three-dimensional story from beginning, middle, and end. Because if that person doesn't have heart and I don't care about that person, forget about it. Even Rachel Day Chong, what's her name? I don't know. In Commando, right? The stewardess, right? It cared a little bit, right? in the midst of her overacting and stuff. But, you know, she had a full-on story. Because you remember, she's found as a stewardess. He's like, look, just like give me a ride. And then now she's on his adventure and flying them in planes and everything like that. What's going on? Hey, my pilot's license. Just so lucky I got you. But either way, that's at the heart of everything there.